Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo alongside me. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment on the podcast here on YouTube. And if you're listening or watching as well on Spotify and Apple, please be sure to follow us on there. Listen to the entire episode. Leave us a 5-star review as well. It greatly helps us. We surpassed 5,000 audio plays across all platforms, so that's a huge accomplishment for us. We've just been growing pretty rapidly in a way. Our YouTube videos have been great. We really appreciate all you guys. We've seen comments, by the way, about just posting clips. We do try and post clips as often as we can, but we're sticking with these long form videos. The podcast is what we've always done, and since we have it on a video platform now, we're just going to go and keep it there. If you're not that big of a fan of it, you could always watch the clips. So no worries. But Matt, how are you? We're here in June 20th, so we're really not that far away from preseason starting up. So with the Euro and Copa America starting, it's really starting to snowball into something bigger. It's more electric.
We're pretty close to preseason. I mean, we're about a month, I think, from the US tour, if I'm correct.
Yes,
I think,
correct.
so like end of July, Milan come to the States, and we're starting to see them play games. And before then, they're going to be playing, and doing preseason type preparation. So we're very close. So with that in mind, we're in full swing with Euro, Copa America starting today, yes, but club football is coming very quickly, and with that is the market, which is obviously going to be something that we consistently focus on, and we deliver content to you guys as things develop.
Yeah, obviously no official signings. Actually, now that I think about it, didn't even make a graphic. Caught my coffee as it went to go knock over, so that was great hands by me. Just to say, Alex Gimenez will be joining Milan on a full-time basis. Fabrizio Romano reported that. That was around €5 million. For that, I believe Real Madrid have a buyback clause with it. Gimenez, we saw flashes of him. There isn't an official word on him going to the U23 side, so we can kind of start with that if you want. What is your ideal season coming up for Gimenez? Is it him being with the main squad, or is it going to the U23 to get a little bit more seasoned? We know he left Real Madrid because he wasn't thrilled with his opportunities with the first team. So what do you kind of think Milan are going to be doing here? I wouldn't be so shocked if it's sort of a start out at the U23. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, with the inclusion of the U23 competing, I think it's at HE this year, I think it's important that, we provide that, heightened, elevated, competition for players like Gimenez and other players in that sort of same age bracket, with the exception of Camardo, who obviously is going to be in that same team as well.
Yeah.
But players like Gimenez, as you mentioned, they've come from Real Madrid, and they really raised questions over their playing time and what their future holds. And, I think it's understanding that Milan, they do value Gimenez. Why would they trigger the option if they didn't? We saw some opportunity for him last year, albeit briefly, and he looked promising, raw for sure, but promising. And I think when you have the U23, it affords you the luxury of playing at a higher level, with the expectation that if you play pretty well to start the season, and with Milan having an extensive injury record, there's a good chance that Gimenez should get the climb up, somewhat quickly or expeditiously, as opposed to some of the others in that U23 sector. So I think Milan do have to give him that opportunity. As I mentioned, there's promise there. Milan do need some support and assistance at that fullback position. But I also think Milan want to avoid a Milos Kerkez type situation. Yeah. They don't want to have triggered the option for Gimenez. He's, meddling between U23 and then, maybe getting calls up to the senior team, but not playing, and then going back to the U23. I think it's pretty important that Milan establish what his role is going to be, for next season. Now, he's not going to be a starter, in my opinion. I think he still has a lot of things to learn and a lot of experience to accrue. But again, I do think that when Milan had triggered the option for $5+ million, I think it could be a little bit higher than that. I think you're setting an important precedent that this is a player that you expect to play some pretty key minutes in the seasons to come. So I'm excited about it. We had really good, a really good record with getting players from Real Madrid recently. Brahim Diaz on a long-term loan was pretty productive for us.
It was
Theo
successful.
Hernandez, we all know what he has brought to the club as well. So I'm hoping that Gimenez can be somewhere in between, maybe not as good as Theo, maybe a little bit more polished and refined than Brahim. And if Milan get that for 5 million, I know Real Madrid have a buyback reportedly in there, but if they can get a player that can produce at the senior level for 5 million at a fullback position, which is not easy to fill, I think that Milan have made a really good move here.
Yeah. I think it really depends on what that option is with Real Madrid. I don't foresee anything crazy going with Gimenez that Real Madrid would love to buy him back. It really depends on that option. I don't think we've seen a number yet on that. Could be double, could be triple. I think 5 million is brilliant, honestly. I'm not overly thrilled with the other links that we'll get into later at the fullback position, but I think you mentioned it. We saw some of that versatility, left back, right back. Florenzi's future at the club is kind of up in the air. It's not even a guarantee that he plays next season for Milan. I think the same would kind of go for Calabria in terms of his contract extension hasn't been there for him. He wants sort of a pay rise. He's obviously just not the greatest of players. So I think Gimenez just buys you so much insurance, and the upside is tremendous. And mind you, €5 million, we're talking about that amount spent for a player that we just shipped to Serbia again, and that's Marko Lazetic. He was bought for 5 million, didn't really show much. We know what kind of prospect he was, but Gimenez has instantly shown more than Lazetic ever did at Milan. So I think it's been a good sign so far. I think they have to do a good. It's hard to kind of gauge how well Milan are going to be developing players like him, Camarda, Bartezaghi, Kevin Zaroli as well with this U23 system. This is going to be the first year of it. We don't truly know how it's going to pan out, but the idea is there. You love what they're trying to do. We're going to have to wait for that end product, but I think Gimenez really has a lot of upside, irregardless of what's going to happen there. I think him and Terracciano are going to have a big summer ahead of them, and we'll see where they're going to be in terms of their development. Also, another fullback that we did purchase from Real Madrid that we know of and love so much is Theo Hernandez. So this is pure speculation. There is no proof that Theo Hernandez will be sold. There haven't been concrete rumors of it. There's been the floating of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, but Bayern have been moving in on another left back. I forget the name of the player right now. It's escaping me. But that is from the Premier League. It looks like Real Madrid are going in for Alphonso Davies. So those two positions there are interchangeable. So now you kind of wonder what would be a market for Theo Hernandez if he were to potentially leave, and how much money would Milan gain from it. And you consistently hear when it comes to Milan and their top stars like Theo Hernandez, Sandro Tonali, when that happened, there needs to be an offer that they can't turn down. And what would that number be, Matt Santangelo? What do you think a number would have to come across Milan's desk that they would be like, I think we actually have to sell Theo Hernandez? Is that number €90 million and above, or could it go to 80 million? Because again, they always point to the sign of Marc Cucurella, who went to Chelsea for 60 million. Theo is basically twice the player. So what do you think?
So I think that, you certain transfers, there's a lot of factors that weigh into a transfer and that drive price ultimately, right? You mentioned Cucurella. There's been other fullbacks, when City brought in Walker, Mendy years ago, like you kind of start to kind of understand where the market is, and the bar gets set, and then it gets eventually raised by that next premier fullback or player in that position, right? And when I look at, what the market is for defenders, what we have seen recent central defenders go for in 80 to 100 million, Gavardiol, just to name someone off the top of my head, the market gets set there, right? Milan have to understand that it has to take something remarkable in a transfer bid to sell Theo Hernandez. It can't be a fee, in my view, similar to what Tonali went for. It's got to be higher than that, because
At
I
least
think
20 million higher, right?
you have to look at the full picture with Theo and what a sale would mean to the club and how much impact that would have on the club. You're talking about a player that, was one of the very first players to sign an extension before we, had all this sort of vision for, having these cornerstone players and to be a threat in the Champions League and to compete for titles. Theo Hernandez was the first one to put pen to paper. Shout out to Kush for that in his recent video covering Theo Hernandez's transfer speculation. He signed till 2026 and he took $4 million net, which is on the same amount as some of the players that we have in our team that we brought in last year. Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek, Chukwueze. So you can't just sit here and take a cut rate price because the player wants to leave, which in my view, I don't think he wants to leave. I think he gave
there hasn't been any word of that.
I think he gave a pretty fair reply, and people took it way out of context and they said, oh, he wants to leave. He's not committing to Milan. I think he understands the business side of it. But getting back to the fee here, it has to be 90 to 100. That's where it's at, because you're talking about basically a finished product who is not even in the prime of his career, his prime years. He's not 28, 29, 30. He's 26, I believe. And he's got 4 to 5 really, really solid years at this level. And with top football, he's a starter for the French national team, who is the favorite to win Euro and one of the favorites that is going to be going into the World Cup. So when you kind of throw everything into the pot here, and you're also talking about potentially Milan's next captain. So you throw everything into the pot here. You cannot sell a player of this caliber, of this importance, with what he's accomplished at this club for anything less than 90, in my opinion, given his age, given his quality, given his importance to the club, and given the fact that he is one of the faces of this current project. You cannot sell for a cut rate price here.
I would even like to mention that, and you kind of did touch on that a little bit. This is a top 3 player in the position in the world.
For sure. You cannot do that.
And I kind of have a hard time now, to be honest with you, finding a better left back in the world than Theo Hernandez.
Well, Milan are going to naturally downgrade, if they sell him. You're not going to get better than Theo on the market right now.
No, you're right. You're literally anywhere you look. And that's the thing, though, because if Real Madrid and Bayern are those big names, doesn't seem like PSG will do it. They have Gimenez. Gimenez is cheaper. He's younger. He's got upside. He played well in the first match. He's got a little issue staying healthy, but he's a talent. So when you kind of go down that list, and I was talking to this with my cousins about it, is what are some of the clubs that could even make an attempt that would pay that amount that you're referring to? And I just keep going to a Manchester United, maybe. Not necessarily of the belief with Manchester City. I think Manchester City have way too much up in the air to be throwing 90 to 100 million on a left back. And then you're kind of looking at Chelsea. Don't see it. Obviously, Arsenal aren't going to do it. He's not going to Spurs. So the list kind of starts to shrink. And then you think to yourself, do they actually have any options in terms of doing this? Because it doesn't actually seem like there's that many. As Denmark equalizes against England, that's over 1.5. So with that, I ultimately think that Milan need to put their best foot forward to get this extension done.
Yeah.
And I just constantly circle back on this, and I tweeted about it. And again, this is all speculation. That's why it's there. When Zlatan says what he says in the press conference, and that how the club does not have to sell them, it's somewhat easy to stomach a great fee coming in for a great player. You could maybe understand it. But as you said, cut rate, hell no. And to not even attempt to pay, and I'm not saying they did this or didn't do it, but to not give him money where people are like, oh, you wanna give a left back $6.5 million net? You're setting a precedent now that other players have to get paid. Well, you know what? Do you want an 8th Champions League or not? Because if you do, you have to pay players like
Martino.
That. You can't keep doing this.
Martino, I just went through the players, right? The salaries, the wages, all that.
Correct.
$4 million is what Teo's making right now.
Correct.
With the previous contract he signed in 2021, I think it was, before the season started, I think. And you look at Chukwueze, Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek, whatever. And then you have that next climb. I mean, Benacer's in there too. You have that next climb where it's Rafa. Do you not think that he should be paid, given his importance, given his tenure at the club, given his impact as potentially a captain? in line with Rafael Leao?
I
Have we
think I
not
think
done
I think
enough?
Teo I think
Have we
Teo
not
deserves
done
7
enough
million net.
financially with our books, with our
Yeah.
progress in the Champions League, sustained growth and success, our revenues, all the numbers, everything?
Do you want to see the number that I
Do
just
you
quoted
not? Do
before?
people not think that his performance and impact doesn't warrant to be paid somewhat in line of Rafael Leao? Because if you're not going to pay players of this caliber this much money, then who is the money going to be going to? Who else in this squad
Yep.
would you pay 7 to 8 million? If it's not Rafael Leao, who else is making that money? Is it Mike Maignan? Now, I will say, if you're going to extend Theo and you're going to give him 7, 7.5, 8, what that tells me is Mike Magnon's definitely gone.
You
Because
think
I
so?
don't see them giving Magnon a bump in pay and he's double and tripling his money that he currently makes. And now you're going to have 3 guys in that 7 to 8. See, now you're setting that sort of standard where it's like Tomori's got to get paid, right? He's going to want a contract. So I think that Milan really need to kind of understand the levity of the situation and understand the fact that next to Rafa, Theo is the face of Milan from a player standpoint.
I think
And I
more
think
so than
he's
him.
more than deserving of a renewal for his commitment, for the grit, the toughness, the play on the field. And he should be the captain. You give him everything. If you went to Teo and you went to his entourage and you said, we'll give you 7 million net, and you're the captain next year, Calabria, it's nice knowing you. We're going to send you out. Teo's signing, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
agree.
he's looking to leave. This is him in a polite way, putting it out in the public and letting it be known that, hey, I love Milan. I'd love to stay here. But I know my worth. I know how good I am. I'm not going to take this massive hometown discount because he's already taking a discount
Of
right now.
course, this is the last big payday of his
Right,
career.
right.
This is and I was saying this to people. I get your point, by the way, on the Mike Magnan side of things. So we'll kind of like circle back to that too, because I think it's an interesting and important point. I don't think they're going to pay Mike more than what Leao makes. I don't think there's any justification for it. And this is always something that I say too. And it's frustrating because sometimes taking financial risks are a good thing because it could lead to other great things like going deeper into the Champions League,
Yeah.
winning more trophies, which is ultimately the prize, right? And you saw that statistic I put up on the screen from Milan data about Milan's increase over the past 8 years are far greater than any other European club. Well, one thing is when you go that low, you can only go so high. So, secondly, there's immense growth there. And they haven't gone super deep in multiple tournaments. They had one deep UCL run. They finished second a couple of times in recent years. They won the title once. They're still lower on the back end side of the top clubs in Serie A when it comes to wage structure. They're still doing things well. They're still financially healthy. If they were to pay up for some of these players, they're not in a hole. They're still going to make Champions League next year, right? Barring a for like a disaster of a season. They're clearly one of the 2 best teams in the league. They've been that for the past couple of years. They have the trophy to back it up. They have the second place finishes to back it up on top of it too. Like they've clearly been the second best team in Italy for almost half a decade now. I think we're approaching that at this point. So the fact that like you won't pay up for something like that, and I'm not saying they will or won't, is silly because eventually to get to where you want to go and to attract other star players, you have to keep the current stars. Because say Milan finally do have a ton of money on the market, right? And they have a wage bill to increase. But sometimes why would players want to arrive if they don't have stars around them? If Theo Hernandez is not there, if Rafael Leao isn't there, goalkeeper, I think you could sort out. It's been proven already. They got rid of a top 10 goalkeeper and got another top 10 goalkeeper. They have to put themselves into a position that sends a signal not only to the fans, but to the players of this project that you are here to win, that you are here to go deeper. When you potentially sell another player, regardless of the fee, that is Theo Hernandez, that doesn't send a good signal that you want to win. And again, I'm preface this by saying it has nothing to do with the fee that comes in. It has to do with paying up for a guy. The guy is worth 7 million net. per season. If he's the best in his position in the world, 7 million net per season is actually a bargain. I
Look
hate
at
to break it to you guys.
look at I'll end it at this.
Sure.
Look at what the top earners are in Serie A and look at some of the names from this past year that are on that list. And you tell me with a straight face if you think that Theo Hernandez isn't better than them and deserves more money than them. Go look at the list. I will leave it at that. Go look at who certain Juventus players. I'll name one.
Yeah.
I think Alexandro or Danilo. Decent players in their day.
Szczesny gets more money. Chiesa gets
Right?
more money.
So
Dusan
Chesney gets
Vlahovic
six
gets
and a
more
half
money.
million per year, I believe. You're
Correct.
telling me Theo doesn't deserve at least that? You're sadly mistaken.
Yeah.
Not saying Milan need to keep up with the Joneses and Milan
Sure.
need to match a bad move by another club with another bad move, but this isn't a bad move. This isn't a player that has this extensive injury record, has a track record of not playing key minutes, not getting up and playing in the Champions League games in important matches. The guy's available, which is absolutely paramount for us. He's 26 years old. He's not over the hill. We're not paying for past production here. We're not playing for a player that just had his 3 best years and now all of a sudden we're giving him 7 million a year and his next 3-4 years are going to be wasted. So big picture, he absolutely deserves an extension. Milan need to get this done. This needs to be a priority amongst other things in the market. It has to be. You cannot let this go into the season.
Correct.
If you do decide to keep him and not move him, and you think we're going to revisit this during the season, in my opinion, this needs to get done in the summer. You need to nip it in the butt. We do not need to go into the next season with his contract in limbo, and now all of a sudden, oh, he's got a year left. Now we're dealing with that. We don't need that.
Yeah. And they take a big loss on that. So again, we'll see what happens. We have to give some credit to management when they did extend Rafael Leao, and they gave him his money. I would like to think and hope that they do the same for Theo Hernandez. And with that said, we finally have gotten to the season review. The season ended a while ago, but there's just been so much going on relative to Pioli leaving, other episodes that you guys have all seen. So here we are with the season review. Can you say failure? Because I can. A real disappointment this season was, right? The only positive that I view here is that Milan made it to the Champions League again. And that's not even something I want to boast about. Standard. You should have. That's it. There's nothing else here. You got eliminated in every single cup earlier than you should have, from Europa League, Coppa Italia, and then again in the Champions League. The fact that they were underperforming in almost every single big game that you could think of this season was a massive disappointment. Even when they did get surpassed a few teams in the Europa League, they were ugly. They could not stop conceding. Pioli did not have any versatility in his tactics. He didn't adjust over the course of the year. And we thank him for everything that he did, is gone. So hopefully he finds a nice landing spot for himself. As for Milan, in terms of player development, I didn't see too much. I think the summer market was decent. And I think the angle of looking at a squad who finished 30 or 40 points back of Napoli or wherever the hell they were to inch closer was somewhat of a positive, right? Like they technically improved in Serie A. But again, this is Milan. You still didn't beat Inter. You got embarrassed by them every single time. Inter won their 20th Scudetto, their second star, in the derby against us. One of the top 5 lowest moments in club history, probably. Something that's never going to go away. There's Istanbul. There's that. Probably the Suli Montari goal that I could think of. Those are the top 3 for me. And then obviously whatever happened in the Banter era, if you just want to group it together as one thing. There was a lot of low moments for a relatively good side. And that's what matters at the end of the day. The lack of results. Milan came away with 0 trophies, a UCL qualification, and looked embarrassing in the biggest of moments and look further away from winning trophies than they are closer. So, in your opinion, this season was what to you? A positive or a negative? I see nothing but a negative with a silver lining or two.
It was a failure. It was a failure because I think, when you think and look about how this team is constructed and you date back to its inception, when we actually built like the core of this team, right? With the Tamoris, Theo, Leao,
2019.
Benacer, Mignon, right? We went from a team that qualified for the Champions League to then winning a Scudetto. And then last year, we made it to a semifinal in the Champions League. So now you're thinking, okay, like you want to keep, it doesn't have to be this sort of massive, massive leap forward year to year, but you started to see the kind of the building blocks come into play and the milestones, stack up for this club over the past 3-4 years. Consistently in the Champions League, now consistently in the Champions League. Top 4 team, okay, now title winner. Title winner, okay, now like deep Champions League run. You call Fugazi or not. Semi-final run. We didn't play well, but we made it to the semi-final of the Champions League. It's a very difficult competition. So when you come into this season, knowing that we lost Ibra, knowing that we lost Maldini, knowing that we sold Tonali, and I know we got players that we do like and rate and that did move into this team, and in my view, were established now starters. Pulisic, Tijani Reinders, I'd probably put there as two of the top 3 acquisitions we made from last summer.
And the super subs.
Still, you mentioned it. The bar is now you're setting the bar back up higher for yourself than what it was previously in previous years in the band before the banter era. You're getting back to that height now. Now it's like, okay, like what's your objectives? Like we want to be in the thick of things in the Scudetto. We want to at least be taking home some sort of domestic honor, domestic cup, whatever.
Correct.
And making consistent runs, deep runs in the Champions League. Now, look, I'm not saying that we needed to make a final run in the Champions League. That would have been awesome. The natural regression would have been regression to the mean would have been, hey, you maybe make the quarterfinal, but at the minimum, you had to get out of your group. You didn't do that, right? You didn't do that. That's one. Coppa Italia is a trophy that I won. Personally, I won. I know people look at it and say it's a domestic cup. Who cares? The teams that win trophies, they look and they go, we have 3 trophies available to us. We won them all. Inter, we won them all. When Juve had Allegri and they had Conte, we want them all.
Juve in a down year
should be aiming for that as well.
Yeah.
So we fell short there. We bowed out to Atalanta. Credit to Atalanta because they wound up being the Europa League champions, right? As it would turn out.
They made it to the final as well.
Right? Fell short against Roma, not even just falling short.
Embarrassed.
We're abysmal. Got embarrassed against a team that we, in recent years, have dominated and controlled.
First time they lost since COVID.
Right. And you can look at it and say, second place finish. That's not bad, Matt. But we finished, 10, 12 points, 13 points behind Inter. I don't even know what the numbers. I stopped counting at some point. So when you look at the whole season combined, it was a failure for Milan. It was a failure for Milan.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make it out to be this huge, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. We're in such a bad spot. No. But let's be real here. We're AC Milan. We want more. We want trophies. That's how you measure success. That's how great teams and great projects over a long span of years measure success. So it's a failure. If you want, I can give you, I can give you my top 3 players.
I was just gonna mention that we finished 19 points off of Inter.
19 points. So I was being generous.
So, no, of course. I thought it was closer, to be honest with you. I stopped counting as well. Because what's the point, right? Like counting second place, like it matters. Both second place finishes. We finished second,
guys. We almost lost by the same amount of points that they now have Scudetti.
Yeah.
20. We almost lost by the Scudetto by 20 points.
Yeah. And
we didn't show up in derbies. And we didn't show up in the biggest games.
In any big game. I know that they showed up in any big game, to be honest with you.
The Napoli game, the Juventus games were like the second
but
one.
Like you're right, but like the Napoli game, like they sucked. They sucked last year. It didn't matter like what they did the year before. Napoli sucked. They were terrible. So even beating them isn't even anything to toot your horn about. So what are you happy about? Beating Roma? They always beat Roma. They didn't lose to Roma.
The Lazio game was ridiculous. Was like a disaster game with all the cards and stuff. So it's not like we had any sort of thing to hang on to where you can say, hey, we finished second, we fell short in these
Yeah,
competitions,
nothing.
but man, we really gave it our all to Inter, and we made it really uncomfortable, and we at least contested for the Scudetto. If you gave me
It
a
was
9-point
embarrassing.
loss in the title, I'd have been like, 9 points, okay. It's not
There's
great. You don't want to lose
there
to your rival, but at least we were there. We were there. We were out of the
and
title for a long, basically most of the season. So
yeah, oh no, they got off to a great start. They
yeah,
played Inter in the derby, and then it went downhill.
yeah.
There was injuries, but I don't really care. I don't really care. It was the way that they played. Like if you and we talked about this throughout the season, if you knew injuries were impacting you defensively and your personnel is different, you have to adjust. I'm sorry, like to bring them up because they're world champions, by the way. The Boston, well, some people might contest that. The Celtics are NBA champions, and the point was when Kristaps Porzingis went down, one of their key players, Joe Mazzulla made adjustments with the personnel that he has within his squad, and this is why Stefano Pioli is no longer here. The second injuries affected the defense, they had to make adjustments in style and personnel and who they had to start. They did not change anything. The manager went on record saying we are not going to change the way we play. And look what you got in return. And I love the point that you were making as well. If you try and look to every other competition, be like Juventus is a perfect example, right? Serie A doing great for most of the season. Then they face Inter in Derby d'Italia. They end up losing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Disappointment. They weren't in Europe. We know why. Okay. So you factor in all those things, disappointment in every direction for Juve.
They still
Guess
got a
what?
cup.
Yeah, thank you. They won Coppa Italia. Even the most garbage of Juves, the most dysfunctional of Juventus, they still won.
And what are
They
we going to
still
do? And
made it
what
to
are
a
we going to
final.
do? And there's going to be people that say, who cares? It's the Coppa Italia. But you
It's,
know
it's
damn
loser
well,
mentality.
Martino, had we won the Coppa Italia, we would have been posting photos. We would have been elated that we won a
Come on,
trophy.
guys.
So I'm not about that energy. I've always been a firm
Agree.
believer that if there's something to win there,
Of course.
I want to see my club win it. And I'm sure you would have the same sentiments come from Pep Guardiola. Do you think he went to that FA Cup thinking, it's the FA Cup, who cares? No. Winning clubs,
That's the
you
and
maintain a
that's the
winning
biggest
culture and a
domestic.
winning expectation. And the winning expectation is for you to go for trophies. And we didn't do that this year.
I think one time in 30-something years, they've won it.
Come on.
Do you know how much this would help us in arguments on the internet, guys? Please, if you win Coppa Italia, this helps our trophy count. Please, you got to help us. So with that, we'll go to the player of the season. You can give me 3 if you prefer that. Guys, comment below on who you think your player of the season is.
This one's tough.
I think it's Theo Hernandez. I think Theo's ability to show versatility at the center back and left back position was something to behold. I think Rafael Leao's absence in scoring within Serie A cost him this. I think it's Theo or Pulisic, to be honest with you. I think Pulisic's consistency over the entire season was great. I think certain matches you would have preferred he had stepped up or been better in. I don't think he was particularly great in the Champions League. I think certain big matches in Serie A, he was lacking at times. Mm-hmm. But overall, it was a phenomenal season. I do think he's the signing of the summer, bar none, not even close. So if you want to talk about that, you can. But for me, Theo Hernandez, him and Pulisic are like 1A, 1B. I don't have Giroud in the top 3. I know the numbers are there for him, but if there were ever a season for looks to be deceiving, that wasn't like a dominant season like many thought. He was getting phenomenal chances created for him. He lacked in pressing. He lacked in build-up. He lacked in mobility. There were certainly glaring negatives about Olivier Giroud last year, but I love him to death, and he did put forth a good season. For me, I think it's Theo 1, Pulisic 2, and then you go with Leao 3, because even in the most down of Leao years, he's still better. He just is. Yeah. That's how good he is, and that's why people get upset. So for me, player of the season, Theo Hernandez. Matt, go for it.
I'm going to go Christian Pulisic.
Okay.
It's going to be Pulisic, Theo Hernandez, and Rafael Leao. And I'll give you my reasoning for that. So Pulisic coming into the season, lot of speculation, not speculation, but a lot of doubt and concern. Will he be healthy? Can he give Milan what they need at the right wing position? It's not his natural left wing position. It's not maybe even his secondary position as an attacking midfielder, number 10. What he did, it was come into this team, and very early, when Rafa really wasn't putting up really great numbers, he was our main attacking component. Our one, if aside from the goal production, he was giving us exactly what we needed and have been missing in that right wing area. You look at his number production, you look at the amount of minutes he played, relative to what we were asking of him to do, the fee, the tall ask of him being like, hey, not only do we need you to be a starting right winger and give us minutes, we need you to produce at your best rate, your best career rate.
Best ever season, yeah.
And that's exactly what he did for us. Scored big goals with the left foot, the right foot. He was creating. He gave us that presence that we needed to help aid and support and take away some of the attention from Rafa. So he gave us everything we needed in that right position. And in my eyes, he was just a little bit more consistent, goal contributions, yes, but in terms of his overall play than Rafa was.
Absolutely.
So I think I give him the nod ahead of Rafa. And with Theo, I know he did a good job of us serving as a emergency center back, and he had his moments down the stretch where he scored goals, a ton of assists. Him and Rafa were really good in particularly in the second half of the season. But I think beginning to end, I feel Christian was a little bit more consistent. So I feel good with that order. Christian Pulisic, Theo, and Rafa. And the reason why I'm giving that Rafa that a little bit of knock and not putting him in second is because if you look at his previous 2 seasons, he was Serie A MVP in the title-winning season. Last year, he was, fifth? I think 15-9 or 15-10.
He was
so he had almost double-digit goals and assists. And then this year, I think he had 9 goals and 9 assists. And I think he went 4 or 5 months without scoring a goal domestically. For a player that you're paying that much money off the back of the renewal, you cannot go through a 5-month goal drought. You cannot do that. I know you can mix in the international.
Sure, for a winger, you can.
But generally speaking, he had the goal against Verona, I think in September.
Correct.
And he went a long period of time without
the rest
Milan
of 2023, he did not score.
And you cannot do that. And on my view, he didn't improve in the most fundamental area of his game enough, and that's finishing. So with all that being said, I think that's why he takes a little bit of a step back and he finishes third.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any contention to it because it's all relative to expectations. Expectations were through the roof for him. You get that contract extension. Middling in the Champions League, had that superb performance against PSG at home. And then it's sort of like the matches against Dortmund, the first match against Newcastle. It's just sort of not all there.
There's a lot of misses too. A lot of missed opportunities that
it just wasn't.
If you're giving those to Vinny Jr. and players in his department players in his department that you want to see him get to and you believe he can get to that level, that he's got to be more clinical in those areas. And it just goes to show you again that for all the great things that Rafa can do on a football field and with the ball at his feet, the finishing is going to be so vital for him and how people view him in from a public standpoint, because Vinny goes to the final, he gets a goal, but he also does all the flair and all the theatrics, and he entertains. So he's entertaining, but he also has the substance to back it up and to support, which is why he's the top of his class in his position, if you're not including Mbappe as a left winger.
Yeah, I don't even know if Mbappe is classified as a left winger anymore for me. He's just not. He's just more of a forward that drifts out to the left, if that makes sense. Not traditionally a left winger like Vinny and them are. He's not going to be playing that at Real Madrid. I think it all makes sense with Leao. And I just have one thing to say about him, and I really love this player. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think his ceiling is one of the top 10 players in the world. However, he's in his mid-20s now. For me, and I don't want to put everything and all this stock into next season, but I'm sorry if he doesn't reach 12 to 15 goals in Serie A with a comfortable season. I'm sorry, he's never going to do that. He's never going to be that player that you think or want him to be, like a Vinicius Jr. He's just there is that reality that he never reaches that level. Now he has to prove it. Like, he has no choice. If his managers, if his teammates, if Zlatan is saying it, that he should be doing it, if all of us like that watch him week in, week out
Yeah.
are saying he could do it, then he has
And
to.
and
If
I don't
not,
think
then
it's
he hit
even
his
in.
ceiling.
It's not even a criticism. It's just the standard we hold him to is high because we believe he can reach it, which I think is a compliment to him as a player.
Of course,
If you think a
absolutely.
player, like when people say, "Oh, Mario Balotelli, it's so disappointing," it's because it's almost as it's like it's not it's a
Balotelli, yeah.
critical. It's critical, but it's also like complimentary because it's like we think so highly of you. We've
Yeah.
seen you play, and we know you can be a great player. That's why it's frustrating to see you not reach that level. It's complimentary because we think you're that good when you can channel everything and you can perform.
Because you see what happens against Napoli in the Champions League. Leao won
Taking
that
over the game.
He
Taking over the game.
That's there, and I love Vinny, and I think Vinny's a better player because he does the more important aspects better than him. But when you see that 70, 80-yard run and he lays it off to Giroud and they score in Napoli, regardless of how Napoli's history is within the Champions League, it's a great Napoli team. It's one of the 3 best Napoli teams of all time. He embarrassed them on that run. Like, it was incredible, and he did it twice that year. He did it in
the 2-goal performance. The 2-goal performance against Inter
in
in the Scudetto in the game at the derby after the Scudetto win.
That was a phenomenal game. There's just when you see him banging some of the goals that he did, like even the goal against Atalanta and Coppa Italia where they ended up losing, your jaw drops and you're kind of like, why isn't that consistent? And I totally understand the outcry from fans when they see that PSG performance. I think the PSG performance is probably the greatest barometer and indicator and single signal pointer to, like, if you can do that 85% of the time, right? Because if we're asking that 100% of the time, that's delusional. That might also be the best player since Cristiano or Messi at that rate, right? Like, that's what it would be. That because it would be that insane. But if you were to do that 75, 80-ish% of the time, that's a top 10 Ballon d'Or placement. So we'll try and finish this up with a couple of things here. So rating the season on a scale of 1 to 10, Milan as a whole, Matt, where would you put them?
Rating just the season.
So like Milan's entire season, every single competition from a scale of 1 to 10 relative to their expectations and their results. What do you give them? 6?
5.5, 6. I mean, they didn't win a trophy, and they had a couple areas where they could have won a trophy. I'm not saying that they were the favorites at any point to win the Scudetto, but they didn't really put up any fight. They didn't contest Inter well enough for me. The Coppa Italia, I feel, is a competition that, if you look at Milan's quality, that's a competition that, with the way that competition panned out and the way that the formatting aligned, they could have won that competition. They could have had a trophy there at least. And again, I think you make a great point. Like, there were some bright spots as far as players that we brought in last year that gave us quite a bit, but not a lot. Like, it's not like a lot of players took the next step. I mean, Pierre Kalulu, we didn't get to see play that much. He was injured. Alex Chow didn't take a step forward. He's still very young. Tomori, you could say, probably even took a step back. He didn't play to the same level.
I think he was so good before that injury. I think he had a really unfortunate
So you look at like everything. Like, did players at least grow? Did this player do
really just a Pulisic and Reinders from day one?
And even some of the players that we expected more from Chukwueze didn't. I will say that one of the bright spots, and I do want to mention this. However you want to fit it in, top players, maybe just missed out on the top players, that we just listed. Tijani Reinders, I think he gave us exactly what we needed in the midfield. I know there's room for him to do more, but he's at that ripe age now where he's like 25, 26. He's a starter for the Netherlands, I believe. He's playing consistent minutes for his country. He played in so many games for Milan. He was available. He gave us a lot of quality that we were missing. And I think he can actually be much better in his sophomore season at the club.
I agree.
If we do get a central defensive midfielder that can allow him to have more of that freedom and luxury to do what he does as a ball carrier moving forward and all those sorts of things. So I just wanted to give Tijani some love there as well, because I think he had a really good season for us.
I think Milan had an overall season of 5. However, the transfer market for me was like a 7.5, almost an 8. I think what they were able to do.
It's a little lower. It's a little lower for me because I feel like it was unfinished.
I think like kind of also like what
If
else
you're
were
judging strictly on the players we brought in and how they produced,
Yeah.
maybe yes, 7 and a
I mean,
half.
but you're also never going to fill that many holes in one season unless you're like
Yeah.
a super rich Premier League club,
Yeah.
right? Like considering everything with financial fair play restrictions, which Milan still do have until summer of 2026, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They have to deal with that. I think that they did a good job in plugging in certain holes. However, no central defensive midfielder. When you have the situation like Rade Krunic was very poor. The deal with De Ketelaere, by the way, listen, they didn't end up taking loss. They got everything that they agreed upon. So that came out after we did the episode. But it was a 5, man. It's results. Nice additions. I think transfer markets can look better over the course of time. Like, for example, really quick before we move on to like the last stuff, 2019, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The first 6 months, you're like, this market sucks. But it's
We
also
spent a decent amount of money there too.
they did. And contrastly, Gianpaolo didn't use anybody. So like, you didn't even get a chance to see it. And look how well that aged. That market built a foundation for half a decade and probably beyond at this point. So I think there's positives to still take away. Noah Okafor can get better. Tijani Reinders can get better. Chukwueze had a very good 2024. He could even build off further on that. Luka Jovic, we'll see how he kind of adapts. He scored today for Serbia. Kind of strange at the moment. We're going to have to see how Fonseca does. And again, it's about improving these players. And I think that's why Fonseca is in here, because Pioli didn't do that great of a job in helping improve a lot of players. You made a tremendous point on that. If you were to even name 3 guys that improved greatly that were here prior to last season, you would say 0. You would probably say 0. The only one would be Yassine Adli, but he wasn't even playing. So he couldn't even get worse. It would be impossible. So, yeah. With that, there are still rumors of Emerson Royale. We'll talk about this for like a minute. I don't think this should happen. I'd be very surprised if they pay up the amount of money that Spurs are asking for with this. Ultimately, I don't think Emerson Royale joins Milan. I could very well be wrong. Regarding that, because there is a lot of smoke with this one. For me, I don't think you go after either Premier League right back. I don't think you spend 30 million for Matty Cash, who's a solid player, not worth 30 million in Milan's situation. And you don't sure as hell spend 20 million for Emerson Royale, who is essentially not much better than Davide Calabria. And the whole point in spending money in a position is to get an upgrade. If it's not a clear upgrade, then you don't do it. Your thoughts in under a minute on Emerson Royale before next season's expectations?
There's very few transfer rumors or transfer targets or eventual transfers that do come to fruition that people, I feel like, universally the majority agree on. And I think Emerson Royale joining Milan, the majority of this fan base across the board, I feel, would be like underwhelmed, and they would say, "Oh, we don't want this player. We don't feel that this moves the needle enough relative to the fee and relative to what we need at that position." I mean, look, we're just content creators, right? We're fans. We love the club. We follow the club. We watch every game. We put out content. We give our voice and our opinions.
Right, for the Athletic as well.
Matters.
Check out the Copa America preview.
But we don't have the jobs that Moncada has, his scouting department has, those in charge of recruitment and signing players. So maybe they see something in him that we don't. But going based off what I see, not if I'm wrong in 3-4 months and he's a player and you could come back to this video, you could say, Matt, you're wrong.
Say whatever you want.
And I will tell you, I owned up to it. I did not see it coming. I just don't like this move. I agree with you. I think Matty Cash is not worth the reported asking price.
30 million.
But I think it's interesting too, because with Denzel Dumfries' contract situation kind of ongoing, DiMarzio came out and said that Inter are monitoring Matty Cash. Now, wouldn't it be something if Inter got Matty Cash and he was prolific for them. And everyone says, "Oh, Moncada and Furlani, leave it to them to miss out on Matty Cash, the same player that most of the fan base I saw when the rumor came out did not want." So
30
that's
million
the
for a
interesting
right
part.
back when they have other
It's a
issues.
lot of money. It's money that Milan can't afford to spend on a position like this, where frankly, if the move doesn't work out, it hits it. If you feel that a 30 million investment that does not work out, you feel that. So I
Of course.
think that's kind of what Milan's approach is with Emerson Royale. We'll see what happens. But right now, I just don't like the player enough to spend what is reportedly being, thrown around with his name.
20 to 25 million
No.
euro. Expectations for next year for Milan. Get to the Coppa Italia final, depending on the matchups there. Fight for the Scudetto. You got to finish, like, if you lose it, be within 6 to 7 points. And I want to win it. I want to hear it. I want the money spent. I think Inter are still the favorites. I think Inter are going to win again.
Mhm.
Have to get out of the group for the Champions League. Different format, by the way. We'll get down and breaking down that when everything gets drawn and etc. But you have to get to the knockout stages of the Champions League. Bar none, no excuses. Don't really give a damn. They're going to have to be good enough. The landscape across Europe is not that great. There's not that many great teams. Real Madrid, Manchester City, we know. But in all reality, Bayern, not as strong as they were. Man United, obviously we know they're not even going to be in the Champions League. There's the Aston Villas of the world. In reality, Milan have an opportunity any given match to beat somebody in the knockout stages, depending on the matchup. Okay? There is talent on that squad. We'll see what happens. It is still very early. Will they sign Weifer at the central defensive midfielder position? Do they sign a center back that is well known or polished enough to help them? Doesn't look like Mats Hummels is coming. Will they sign Joshua Zirkzee, or will they pivot to another striker? Because we don't know what Kia is going to be doing with his aging commissions here. They're around 15 million euros, and he is not budging. And then again, the right back position. And what does Paulo Fonseca do in terms of balancing the team and making their defense a lot stronger? Because we talked about it. Only one other team in the top 12 conceded more goals, and that was Monza. By the way, they hired Alessandro Nesta, so I hope to God we don't drop points against them. I'm going to get so emotional when they face him. Anyways, that'll do it for the podcast. We appreciate you guys so much. Again, subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, here on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Everything on your thoughts. What do you expect for the market in the coming years? That Milan podcast on Twitter at that Milan pod. You can follow myself at Martino Puccio everywhere and at Martino_Puccio on Instagram. And then Matt's information is all here. It's been on the ticker the entire time. The link to the descriptions have been in the video, or sorry, whatever. You know what I meant there.
You guys have a game.
Wording. But yeah, we greatly appreciate everything. It's going to be an electric summer. Hopefully we have some more positives with signings. We're going to get some people on to kind of discuss some of this stuff, and look out for an episode with Ali Fisher. We hope to do highlighting the entire summer and what you could expect from the budget. Any other final words before we sign off?
No, I hope you guys have a fantastic summer. Enjoying the Euros, Copa America, enjoying some downtime. And yeah, thank you as always for the support with the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple. Give us a follow on Twitter too. Let's see if we can get that account number up. I know people see like Martino or I post the episodes, but we do have an actual Twitter account. So if you want to be so kind to support that, we do post like just general thoughts that maybe we're not going to put into a podcast or a clip there as well. So yeah, thank you guys for the support, and we hope that the summer is very exciting for you as well.
Yeah, and again, also other content creators that you should be following that are Milan related. That Milan Weekly podcast, Coast to Coast with Gio and Fabio. We're trying to get Fabio on as well. There's obviously Football Kush, Max and Gino's podcast. I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head. Sempre Milan is obviously another great podcast that you guys could listen to as well. Am I missing one more? I might be. That I could be thinking of, but those are the majority of the people. I am so sorry if I forgot anybody. But other than that, I got most of the people, and we love helping and sharing other people's podcasts and platforms if it's warranted. So if people are watching, by the way, because there was, I don't care. I'll speak for myself on this. Matt doesn't have to back this up. Don't accuse us of not supporting other podcasts when we do that all the time. And we have plenty of great friends. So I take great insult to comments like that. So when you open your mouth next time, make sure you're accurate. Other than that, guys, enjoy your day.